people, we've been working our way through this book, Calling, Finding and Following an Authentic Life, which is fabulous. Before we get to that this morning, I wanted to revisit a story that I've actually told before. And I think it's very relevant to a lot of what we've been talking about in our discussions and also from the book. And this is a story about a mountain climber. He wanted to climb this incredibly high mountain. And after lots of preparation, he decided that he wanted all the glory for himself. And so he decided to climb alone. So he started to climb up the mountain, and of course, as the day went on, he felt he was getting closer and closer, and so he thought he would just continue. But before he knew it, the night fell, and he found himself in total darkness. He knew he wasn't that far from the top, so he decided to try and keep going, when all of a sudden he slipped, and as he started falling through the air, he saw his life flash in front of him. He just knew he was going to die and was plummeting down, feeling gravity sucking him towards the earth. He kept falling and falling, and in those moments, of course, he saw everything good and everything bad that had happened to him in his life. And just as he was thinking how close death was getting, suddenly there was a tremendous jerk, and the rope tightened around his waist. He was hanging there, absolutely terrified, and so he did the only thing that he could do, which is to scream out, "Help me, God!" And a deep voice answered, "What do you want me to do?" And he said, "Save me!" And the voice said, "Do you really think I can save you?" And he said, "Of course I do, that's why I'm asking." And the voice said, "Then cut the rope." Well, he thought, and he tightened his hands around the rope around his waist. The next day, the rescue team tells a story of a climber that they found hanging from a rope. He was dead and totally frozen. His hands were so tightly glued to the rope, and he was only 2 feet from the ground.
Story of my life.
Exactly. Why did it go down? Are you sure?
It was dark. It was dark. But this, of course, is what we talk about.
Yes.
Surrender. It is so easy to say that you will surrender, that you will let go. But when the opportunity comes, fear steps in and usually stops you from taking that one little step, as it talked about in the meditation this morning. It's again a razor's edge, commitment, risk. So, moving on. Yes.
I was going to say, in addition to the fear setting in, I think the other thing that sets in is we begin to intellectualize things, which may be rooted in fear.
Yeah.
But it's so easy to go from, okay, now.
Oh, absolutely, because I think the primal thing is fear, and absolutely. And then I think you're right, that the next part of the process is that we try to rationalize. And so, and of course, as soon as rationalizing steps in, then faith gets to the curb.
And if you don't mind talking to him.
Right.
So yeah, you're absolutely right, Shelley, and I think that is the big problem with it. So, back to callings. The whispers of your soul trying to nudge you, sometimes even push you to where it is that your soul knows that you need to go, even if you don't. And this particular, the first part that we talked about were all the ways in which, spirit, your higher power, whatever you want to call it, tries to nudge you through all sorts of different ways, whether it's, meeting someone, or dreams, or synchronous events, or illness, all sorts of different ways that the soul tries to make contact and push you in a direction. And one of the ways that we can actually invoke those calls, those whispers, is through pilgrimage. We've been talking about pilgrimages and all the different ways that you can do that. We tend to think of pilgrimages as having to be something massive that we undertake, heading off on the Camino Way, or going to Jerusalem, or, Muslims going on the Hajj to Mecca. But you can have pilgrimages right here. Something as simple as a pyramid can be your pilgrimage. The whole thing that we started to talk about was this incredible trip that this couple took, kayaking around Lake Superior. And if you remember, this thing went on for months. It was actually an extremely tedious and hard journey. And they were trying to make this circle, which, as we discussed, Carl Jung said that the circle is the classic symbol for wholeness or God. And so they set off, and this thing went on. They had this most amazing journey. I'm trying to bring those of you who weren't here up to speed real quick without boring those of you who sat through it last week. I love the quote that they had in there by Rainer Maria Rilke, where he said, "I am circling around God, around the ancient tower, and I have been circling for 1,000 years, and I still don't know if I am a falcon, or a storm, or a great song." I just love his stuff. So, bless you. My goodness. So, and then we learned that when they came back, Anne actually found that her relationship with her husband, with her family, had changed. And so, she'd gone from thinking that this may think a lot of things to find it that it had actually unpacked a lot of stuff and brought things to the forefront. And the sort of paragraph where we ended last week said, 9 months after the end of the trip, Anne removed her wedding ring, which didn't come off easily, and said to her husband, "It feels to me that we're moving into a different kind of relationship here, and it's not about a traditional marriage." And after another 9 months of working hard to make the transition from marriage partners to friends who wanted to continue raising their children together, and of unravelling some of their entwined roots. They actually could not hold it together, and so Anne and the children moved to Washington State, and she co-founded with a friend a seminar and teaching business called Peer Spirit, whose motto fittingly is "In service to the circle." So, the point that he's trying to make here is that just like the hero's journey that we discussed, there has to be a return. And many times we discount that because we get so caught up in the pilgrimage, in the spiritual journey. He said Anne's experience in making the transition back home is instructive of a critical phase of the spiritual journey, the return. While you were out there circling around the ancient tower, those you left behind were doing the dishes, feeding the baby, and going to work as usual. In other words, they were not on retreat, so they can't possibly know what you've seen or heard or felt, and they want to know, or maybe they don't. Either way, it's important to be sensitive to this on returning to the ordinary world. While away from it, you've been removed from many of the normal laws of human exchange and conduct, the imperatives of time and obligation, sometimes the comforts of home. You've been on the road, in the wilds, under a spell, deep in the tropics of meditation. You've drunk strange brews, spoken in tongues, or not at all, walked around inside yourself. You've climbed a mountain, slept under the stars, breathed rarefied air. You've been accountable to no one, worn the same clothes for 4 days on end, and had the bathroom all to yourself. Re-entry is a sort of decompression, and like returning from a deep sea dive, it's best handled slowly. If you move too fast, you endanger yourself and your experience. In fact, it's one of the simplest ways to sabotage a spiritual journey. On the last day of a vision quest I took into the Trinity Alps some years ago, one of the guides warned me that whatever promises I made to myself during the journey, whatever insights I gained and intentions I set, I would need to defend them against the tendency of life to level all uprisings, to stomp my enthusiasm back into low relief. Be careful, he said, lest I twist an ankle going back down the mountain, get into a car wreck on the drive home, get sick, or get into arguments with others. Beware of impulses, however unconscious, that might trigger a panic of retreat back to the relative safety of the comfort zone. He reminded me that after big openings often come big closings. After highs, lows, after breakthroughs, breakdown. Being part of a couple, I knew this one by heart. Intense fights often follow intense intimacy. I know one smart individual who, upon returning from a vision quest, simply went out to a movie with his wife and saved his tales of an adventure and metamorphosis for the following day. My own guide's admonition, which was astute and saved me from a bundle of trouble, ended with his suggestion that I post a guardian at the gate. And I think this is often something that we discount so very much, is that when we go through some kind of spiritual upheaval or spiritual progression, we tend to think that other people are moving along with us doing exactly the same. And many times they are not. And so I think there emerges a level of frustration that we can't understand why they're not understanding what we've gone through, and we don't understand why they're not following with us or don't get it. And you're all awfully quiet again. Oh, good. Kathy.
You're kind of describing my life in the last 4 years because, well, luckily I was already single. But with the deaths and the mediumship happening and leaving All Souls, which was too humanist for me now, and I have a few friends left there that I'm close to, but when we get together, sometimes it's like you can feel the chasm. You know, I think it's, you know, I'm one that as I progress through life, I pick up groups and then I move on, and then I pick up groups, which is a kind of a loner's life, really. That's how I dealt with that. But it's interesting how as your vibration changes, not for better or worse, but as you, it can be as simple as leaving a job, though. And when you go back to visit 2 years later, you're like, oh, well, I fit in so perfectly in this lunchroom when I was here last time, but now it's like I'm come back to have lunch with these people, and it's like you have nothing in common with them anymore.
Right.
So it's just a matter of everybody's life experience. You come together and then you fall apart. That doesn't bode very well for a marriage. But
No, but I mean, I think that, you know, I mean, this is exactly the point that I'm trying to make, is that we're all moving and changing and going through this metamorphosis, whether it's spiritual or just in our ordinary everyday lives at different rates. And I think we have to be mindful that not everybody is going along the same path as you. And I think you also have to remember that, you know, as the Hindu proverb tells us, there's many roads to the top of the mountain. Not one of them is any better than the other. They're all just different. Roseanne.
I think that's why we are all here. Because these are the people I found when everybody else wanted to put me in an insane asylum.
A few of you still do.
I need to tell you that this is the insane.
That's what I'm trying to say. You know, family, I mean, I get along with family now because I don't expect any acceptance from them in terms of my belief system. I just let their path be their path.
right.
But, so I mean, it was like horror when I first tried to talk about anything that happened to me, and I learned to shut up fast, as many of us have.
Yes.
Friends, family, husbands, whatever. You know, it's a different track, and I had to find my people, if you will.
Absolutely.
And I suppose I could have survived without my people. I don't know.
That's again, if you believe in the sacred contracts, that was part of the path was
Well,
that you would
exactly.
come across. Pam.
Yeah, there's this thing I was reading about in spirituality. It's called bewilderment. And a lot of times when you go on a pilgrimage or something like that, you become very bewildered because things are really different than what you thought they were.
Right.
And when you get back, you have this cognitive dissonance.
Dissonance.
Yes.
And
Absolutely.
so it's just something to be aware of, that you may end up giving up everything you thought you knew.
No, but I like that. Bewildered. Yes, Stephen.
The funny thing is, there's a flip side to this coin like anything else. And the story is that after all these years of meditation, I had the nerve to give my dad a book on Yogananda.
Right.
And I see him every week. The next week, he gave me back a magazine article from the RP about how meditation is part of a funded program from Blue Cross Blue Shield in Hawaii.
Wow.
So he was listening, and he made progress on the book. Surprised the hell out of me.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
So we come together, and we work hard. and you can never depend on one way or the other.
No, you can't, and that is the thing. But I think also you have to be appreciative and mindful that their path, their journey is their path and their journey. What we try to do is to think, oh, you know, this is wonderful, it makes me feel so good, I'm so spiritually advanced, I will drag them along with me. It doesn't work. Shelley.
I was just kind of like Kathy thinking back on, as my path evolved over the last several years, how lonely that period was when others weren't growing with me or taking that same path. And one of the things that I think we underestimate, and Roseanne spoke to that, is just the power of community and redefining that and being very conscious of how critical that is in so many areas of our, evolution, whether it's physiologically or spiritually or otherwise. And part of that I got through social media, oddly enough. I know social media gets a lot of that, but it broadened my community, and I was able to reach across, countries and borders to find people that I had this commonality with.
Yeah, there's an organisation in Britain. It's called the Human Givens Institute, and the two founders, Ivan Tyrrell and Joe Griffin, have come up with a slightly different model to Maslow of the hierarchy of needs that are necessary for our mental health. And one of them is community. It is really key. It is, these, I should find them for you because they're wonderful. So things like the need to be appreciated.
Right.
We all need that. Even if we don't recognize it, we all need to be appreciated. We all need community. We all need to have some kind of attachment to some kind of higher power, and it doesn't matter what that might be, whether it's God or whether it's video games. It's believing that, there is some higher power that you can relate and attach to. It's very, very important. And I think that, isn't that what this is all about? Is a safe place, a community where you can express your weirdness, your insanity, and know that you won't be judged, that you'll be accepted no matter how weird and wacky you are. Or,
it's always a reflection of yourself, though.
Of course, just saying.
So you're saying it, so.
There you go. Thanks, Kathy.
Native Americans, long before we came here, was a prime example of community. They didn't raise their kids by themselves. The community did.
Right.
Because they were so tight in their community.
But I think the other thing too is that Darwin's theory of evolution has become so corrupt over time. And especially, I would say, within America, this belief that it's the survival of the fittest. And yet, if you go back and look at it, Darwin actually said that cooperation was actually what guaranteed survival. Yes?
Well, even the Blue Zones, for those of you that have ever heard of the National Geographic research, where they looked at the countries or communities, societies where people live past 100 routinely, as opposed to being an outlier. Most people live past 100 in most areas, and they're disease-free and disability-free. And they came up with 9 characteristics that those communities share. And only one of those communities, unfortunately, was in the United States. And that was the Seventh-day Adventist community in Loma Linda, California. But when pressured to say, of those 9 characteristics, which one's probably the most important to longevity, Dan Buettner reluctantly said is the community.
Yes.
And he said it's not community like we experience in America. It's an interdependence.
That's it. It's the village mentality is what it is. And believe it or not, those, I grew up in a wee area of Edinburgh, and it was kind of like a village. Everybody knew everybody.
Yeah.
Obviously, once you stepped outside of that, then, you were part of the big city. But I can remember my mum and my nana walking up and down Easter Road, and everybody they met, they knew them, they knew about their families, it was a real village community mentality. And I think that is missing. And one of the reasons it may be missing in America is because of space. When I grew up in Edinburgh, it was all tenement buildings. It was a very sort of crowded area. Yes,
I
Mary.
think that's changed with the advent of the suburbs, because all big cities were like that. I mean, whether you were in Baltimore, whether you were in New York, you were in a community where you actually didn't have to leave that area, and you knew everyone in that area. And
Right.
they started mostly, they were ethnic too. These were,
Yes.
it was all
See.
Jews, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But as after World War II, when there was a chicken in every pot and a car in every driveway, and we moved to the suburbs, that all changed.
Which is my point. Space.
Yeah, exactly.
That all the while that we were, in these sort of smaller living areas, it was so much easier to interact. But then when you started adding all this space, then people put space between them and their neighbours. They put them between them and their families even. So, Jan.
There's so many factors involved in here. I think climate, for one thing, because I know in the summertime here, we're all in our houses with our doors and windows closed and the air conditioner going.
Yes.
And I go visit my sister in Tacoma, and they don't have air conditioning. Their windows are all open.
Yes.
So you hear the neighbors, and you hear the dogs, and you hear the chickens, and you hear the cars going up and down the street. And it's a sense of community
There we go.
that you don't have when you're isolated in your house with
That's
air.
another good point. Mary Ann?
Well, I was thinking when I came in, I saw, I think Kathy has a panda koala bear, and I read recently that so many of the koalas in Australia, 70%, almost 70% of their natural habitats been burned down.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
And that made me think also of the Cultural Revolution, and also though about young people moving to the cities. And it's kind of like humans lost their natural habitats when industry really began growing. Whether it's a silk trade and people no longer have that, or food growing, the big industrial machine took over a lot of that stuff, and it's almost like forcing us out of our natural habitat. So we come to the cities to make money and to make a living.
That's a really interesting point, isn't it?
Corporations and greed.
Sorry, I'm getting to everybody else.
So, just to be a little contrarian here, I mean, I think, for example, I grew up in India where there's a strong sense of interaction between people and this bonding and so on. But I chose to come here, and a lot of people who grow up here in small towns tend to move to the city. They want to get away from their bonds of, from the bondage of the small community, because they want to find themselves outside of that. So sometimes it can be a false sort of security that it provides you when you're trying to find yourself.
But don't you think that it's all kind of Freudian in the, the tribes and leaving the tribe to step out on your own? And we've been doing it since the beginning of time.
Yeah, I mean,
And
I think what I like about the Center of Light is that it's a bunch of people who quit their tribes and are here. And ironically, we think we're a tribe, but we are really a loosely coupled group of people who sort of do their own thing.
Sure, what a tribe of
Yeah.
different tribes,
Right,
yes,
right.
absolutely, different tribal members. Barbara?
Well, I was going to come off with the same line as echo as Shanae is that having a community doesn't mean that cures, where we are.
Oh, absolutely
because
not.
the control, your the conformity will hinder your growth.
Uh-huh.
If you're
But also-
if you're not fitting in that village.
Right.
I mean, the witches, what happened to the witches?
Yes, that is the point. I remember there's been black sheep since the beginning of time. There's always a black sheep, Stephen.
I was going to say space and climate and all these things we can name only begin to touch on what, keeps a group tight.
Right.
You have diversity of ideas, you have diversity of potential as you see it,
Right.
and so we all think differently. And because of the internet, for one, we're seeing more opportunities for our thoughts, for our actions, our service,
Right.
and education. With that being the case, even now in a small neighborhood, people don't know the neighbors the way they used to know.
Oh, no, absolutely.
But they know them better than in the 60s. In the 60s, they knew them better than, the 50s, they knew them better than the 60s.
60s, yes. Brad?
I have to put in a plug for dogs.
Yes.
I live a solitary lifestyle, have for years. I live by Zinc Park.
Uh-huh.
I don't even try to remember the humans' names,
No.
but I know all the dogs.
No.
And now over time, the dogs have been replaced by Mother Nature,
Yes.
and see the whole cycle there.
Right.
And I've ended up, I won't do plus or minus. I live within a mile of where I was conceived.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
Wow.
that's what I say.
Well, you don't.
Oh, dog. Oh, never. Try.
Well, what I was going to say earlier was that I think what has destroyed that sense. I mean, I know communities like in Bixby of people that are all like-minded and traditional and Christian, and they're still really tight knit. And I used to envy that until I realized I didn't fit in that box. And so diversity is what has broke up community, but it's being replaced by community on social media and everywhere else. And I developed a name a minute ago for what we are.
What?
We're the BSS.
Which
Not
is?
to be confused with BS. The Black Sheep Society.
Well, there you are, yes. But I think that brings up a really...
But it's not a box. We're not going to be a box.
No, that brings up an interesting point from what Barbara was saying. That many times when you begin to identify with the group, as you said, these people that are all living in the same area and they all identify as Christian, they all do the same thing, that is also extremely limiting.
Absolutely.
It's very hard to step outside of that, and that's where it takes so much courage to even, challenge those beliefs and things. Shelley?
I think, as much as we talk about religion and churches, traditional churches, as they're, from the perspective of their shortcomings, the one thing they do well is they build community in a lot of respects.
Yes.
Because as you were describing, some of these aspects of the story, it took me back to growing up in a Catholic church where you knew every child from birth on, they loved on you, they supported you, whatever. There is a sense of belongingness and acceptance that comes with that. And I think to that point, I'll just end it here, is that I think there's such an opportunity for us as a community to do a better job of marketing just what we have here. Because there are so many people that are in that chasm between religion and spirituality, and they're just kind of looking. They don't know what's available here locally.
Absolutely.
Right. Absolutely.
Peggy?
I really like what you said, because I've been off for a week, and Monday I'll go back to work. I really like what you said about posting your guardian angel at the door.
Yes.
Because, the minute you go into a family reunion or back at work or whatever, after you've
Right.
been on a journey or a quest. It is just so easy just to just step in line.
Yes, exactly. And in fact, he goes on, Orpheus would be a suitable choice of sentry, guardian at the gate. And his story is instructed here. Orpheus, whose lyre, it is said, moved even the stones to follow him, lost his wife, Eurydice, to the bite of a snake. Bereaved, he went on to the underworld and tried to persuade Hades to let her return to life. His music and lyrics were so beautiful that all punishments were suspended for the day. Tantalus forgot his thirst. Prometheus' liver was given a rest. Sisyphus just sat on his rock and listened. Hades relented and granted Orpheus' wish, but on the condition that, while leading her to the upper world, he not look back at her until they had passed the portals of the underworld. But just as he reached the outlet, Orpheus, in a moment of forgetfulness or doubt that Eurydice was still following him, looked back, and she instantly disappeared. If you forget that you have changed while on your journey, that you come back followed by another whose spirit you sought, that you made promises that must be kept, and that there are conditions to your transformation, you'll jeopardize your mission. Know that your vision will follow you back and must be incorporated into your life and the lives of those you know. The best way to communicate your experience to others, says Foster, is not to talk about it, but to live it. Vision, if it is anything, is your life story in action. And I think that that is one of the big mistakes that we make. Because we feel that we need to justify and communicate and explain and break it down and disseminate.
Share. Sometimes it's just
And share. Yes. But sometimes sharing is not the thing to do.
No kidding.
Because if your family thinks you're insane and you share, no, I'm just teasing. I'm just teasing. Because that is the thing. Sometimes, remember, I say over and over and over, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And many times we think by sharing that we are leading, guiding, directing, and all it does is annoy and upset the other person because they're not ready. Mary?
This is a little abstract, but I think...
Oh, really?
I mean, what I'm going to say. I think we all, part of the sharing and all of that stuff is because we're looking for structure that makes us feel safe. And we are, in every walk of life, we're trying to find this structure. It's comfortable, and then it has boundaries and edges, and there we are. But the truth of the matter is what we're really looking for is that security that comes only from within. And so we're doing the circle dance around, and we aren't going to the center. And but it's so normal for us to do that because
absolutely,
that's just, we've done it forever.
Yes, and I think that this is part of the transformation that many of us have gone through, the movement from, west to east. Yes, Akhilesh.
So I was just thinking, based on what Mary said, it seems that a large portion of belonging to a group is affirmation of what you're doing, and maybe just sort of getting. To me, that's like if you think about all the people who want to actually, who seek to find their own spirituality, they normally leave society, right? So they become monks, or they basically reduce their ego, right?
Right.
And at that point, they don't need to belong to a society. At best, they belong to a loosely coupled group of people who sort of help each other along, but they don't really seek affirmation from each other.
That's also community. To go into
It is a community, but I think that.
Or,
Yeah, but I think the difference is that you're not seeking affirmation for your path. Whereas I think with the convent you're all following the same path. So
and I think you're saying affirmation. I think it's what I was saying earlier about appreciation.
Right. Sure.
And even if it is just that somebody here appreciates that you have a different point of view to them, that's still appreciation. And I think if you join a convent and everybody is completely silent, the fact that you are there means that you get the appreciation of others, that you're acknowledged, and so it's part of this group. Barbara.
Well, I just want to say that I don't know what percentage, but I believe a factor in all of this also is the consciousness of mankind rising, and the only way it can do that is through transformation.
Yes.
And so we have more and more people, I think, because it is more open. Our choices or our awareness or whatever is more open in society now to pursue that growth. And so it's
But I think that is what Mary's saying about these boundaries and edges and things like that. And I think the more that we push those boundaries or step over those boundaries, that is when the rise in consciousness is actually taking place. And I think it was, oh gosh, we're out of time. I think it was George Carlin that said, yes, that people are leaving the churches in droves and turning to God. And that's what's happening, I think. So people are moving beyond the ritual and this sense of community, because that is a lot of why people keep going week after week after week. It is this community, the sense of belonging. And I think that as people step outside needing that, community and, feeling that they can progress forward without holding on to this rigid dogma, that's when I think that you're seeing the consciousness rise in society. And sadly, we are at the end of our time.